The old witch won't even notice when we sell her house, my daughter-in-law Lydia whispered, smug and sharp like a pin through silk. She thought I was unconscious. Her voice cut through the sterile beep of machines, floating over to the corner of the hospital room where my body lay still. To them, I was just flesh on a mattress. I closed my eyes tighter, hoping they wouldn't catch the tremble in my lashes. They were standing by the window. Lydia, bold with her mouth full of malice, and Brian, my only son, standing beside her like a rusted weather vane, always pointing whichever way she blew. He didn't say much, just murmured agreement in that flat, coward's tone he'd perfected over the years. My son. The boy I once sang lullabies to in the dark, now nodding along as his wife planned to gut me of the only thing I had left, my home. She was laughing softly, wickedly, and checking something on her phone. The agent said we could list this week. Once that paperwork's in, it's basically done. She'll never know. By the time she's lucid, we'll be gone. You want to keep waiting until she croaks? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the wires from my arms and throw that chair she was lounging in straight through the glass window. But I didn't move. I laid there in silence and let the tears slide hot and quiet into my hairline. I couldn't risk tipping them off. Not yet. Instead, I burned every word into memory. Every condescending tone. Every callous joke. My son's silence. Her cruelty. The smell of her perfume. Artificial roses. I memorized it all. I would need it later. She leaned in then, toward Brian, and I heard the sentence that took my breath clean out of me. Once the house sells, we can finally move. Start over somewhere nice, without the old lady dead weight. Honestly, she's been more used to us like this. More used to them unconscious. I couldn't breathe. I felt the betrayal settle in my chest like cement. I'd been in this hospital for days, recovering from a mild stroke. The doctors had told them I might be disoriented for a while, and they'd seized the moment. Like vultures. I always knew Lydia didn't like me. But this wasn't dislike. This was war. She kissed Brian on the cheek and walked out of the room like she owned it. My son lingered behind a moment longer. Then he said it, soft, almost like a prayer. Just sign the listing papers when the notary comes, okay, Mom? Make it easy. He left without looking back. And that's when something inside me snapped into place. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. Not in front of them. They thought I was weak because I was quiet. They thought memory loss meant helplessness. But what they forgot, what Lydia never understood, was that I'd lived through harder winters, deeper betrayals, and longer nights than this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't flinch. I began to plan. Quiet doesn't mean weak. 3 days later, I opened my eyes slowly, as if they hadn't moved in weeks. The nurse had just taken my vitals. Lydia was perched on the room's guest chair, scrolling through her phone, legs crossed, a fake concerned smile plastered on her face. She was wearing pearl earrings that looked too expensive for someone always, just getting by. "Oh," she gasped when she saw me blinking. "You're awake." I stared at the ceiling, let my eyes wander slowly like I didn't recognize a thing. When I finally looked her way, I played along, tilted my head just slightly and whispered, "Where am I?" She stood too fast, knocked her purse off the armrest. "You're at County Memorial, remember? You had a little episode. But it's okay now. You're doing so well." "County?" I repeated, squinting like the name meant nothing. "Is that in Ohio?" Her lips twitched. I caught it. The tiny flicker of discomfort. No, still in Georgia. "Don't worry about that." She patted my hand, too hard, too fast, and added, "We'll take care of everything. You just rest, okay?" I didn't respond. Instead, I let my eyes drift back toward the window, pretending not to notice how quickly she texted someone as soon as my head turned. Probably Brian. Probably telling him I sounded confused. Good. Let her write that down. Let her start building the case against me. I'd already started mine. Later that evening, Brian showed up. Brought me soup in a styrofoam cup, just like I used to bring him when he was sick and couldn't sleep. I looked at it like it was foreign. He smiled in that forced too polite way, then leaned in and said gently, "Mom, do you remember what day it is?" I blinked at him, slow and uncertain. "Easter? It's September." "Oh." I stared into the soup like it held the answer. Then, without meeting his eyes, I mumbled, "How long have I been asleep?" "A few days. But it's okay." He reassured me. "You're doing really well." Lydia stepped behind him, arms folded, watching me like a hawk. "Do you remember the fall?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "What fall?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, almost triumphant. "That's okay, sweetheart. We'll explain everything in time." I wanted to laugh right then. Sweetheart? I hadn't been her sweetheart in 10 years. Not since she started calling me the old bird behind my back at Thanksgiving. But now that I was supposedly broken, she was syrupy sweet. I played the part to perfection. Each hour, I repeated a question I'd already asked. I mispronounced names. I called Lydia Linda once, then apologized for it 4 times like it bothered me. She ate it up. Brian looked uncomfortable, but he never corrected her. Never asked her to stop pushing my hair back like I was her child. He just let it all happen. That night, alone in the dark, I sat up slowly and flexed my fingers. They felt stiff, but strong. I still had my faculties, still had my mind. They wanted me confused. They expected me to surrender. But the more I feigned fragility, the more confident Lydia got. Let her feel the wind too soon. Because the best part about being underestimated is the moment their smile starts to drop, when they realize the game they thought they were winning was never theirs to begin with. 2 days after I came home, I walked into my own living room and didn't recognize it, not because of my act, but because pieces of my life were missing. The cross-stitch from 1984, the one I made when Brian was still small enough to fall asleep in my lap? Gone. The ceramic angel from my sister's funeral? Missing. My great-grandmother's quilt, usually folded over the arm of the couch, nowhere in sight. "Where's the quilt?" I asked gently, turning to Lydia. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, that old thing? We took it to get dry cleaned. It was dusty. Thought you'd want things fresh and clean when you got back." She was lying. I could hear it in the way her voice stayed too casual, too smooth. "Dry cleaned," I repeated, nodding slowly. "That's nice. And the photo albums?" She blinked, but only once. "Oh, we packed a few things up to keep them safe, that's all. Decluttering, you know? Makes it easier for you to rest and recover." I said nothing, just looked around the room again, this time catching the blank spaces on the shelves. My life, tidied out of sight. Brian came in from the kitchen carrying a new bottle of multivitamins, something he never once cared about in all his adult life. "Look what I picked up for you, Mom. Helps with brain health," he said, setting it on the table beside me. "We just want you to be comfortable." Comfortable. Like a patient. Like a ghost. I smiled at him. Weakly. Just enough to sell it. "You're both so kind," I murmured. "Taking care of everything. I don't know what I'd do without you." Lydia lit up at that. She practically beamed. She thought she was winning. Meanwhile, I was counting the boxes by the hallway closet. 3 on Tuesday. 5 today. And I'd heard her on the phone the night before, pacing the porch while I pretended to nap. "Yeah, she's back home now. But she's out of it," she whispered. No pushback. Brian's gonna handle the signatures. I already emailed the realtor our timeline. Once the papers are signed, we're golden. 2 weeks max. Golden. She used that word, like my home was a prize. I kept my head turned toward the window and let the rage bloom quietly behind my ribs. I imagined her selling the house, walking through it with strangers while I sat in the next room pretending not to hear. She didn't even have the decency to wait for me to die. She was clearing out my memories while I was still breathing. Later that evening, I shuffled into the guest bedroom they'd set up for me, just until you feel strong enough for the stairs again. And I found another box, this one half filled with my cookbooks. My name was still written in the margins. Notes for Christmas 1989. Lemon cake. No zest for Brian. I sank to the edge of the bed and ran my fingers over the spine of one. Lydia called out from the kitchen. "We're ordering Thai. You want anything?" "No, thank you," I replied. Not hungry. I couldn't eat, not while my home was being hollowed out like a melon, scooped clean from the inside, leaving only a shell of what once mattered. But that night, as the house fell quiet, I took out a pen and scribbled one word on the inside cover of that cookbook. Wait, because they were rushing. And when people rush, they get sloppy. Let her think the house was as good as sold. Let them think I didn't even notice. I was still here, still breathing, still watching. They wanted me erased? They'd have to fight a whole lot harder. And I wasn't the one losing ground. They were. Box by box, lie by lie. I hadn't been to church in months. Not since the stroke. Not since Lydia started showing up with Brian on Sundays to, quote, represent the family. I guess she figured if she smiled at the choir and dropped a check in the donation basket, people would forget the way she looked through me like I was a loose floorboard. But that morning, I insisted on going. "Just for a little while," I said, clutching my purse like it was the last honest thing in the house. "Might help clear the fog." Lydia hesitated, fingers hovering too long over her phone, probably weighing the risk. She finally gave a tight smile. "Of course, Margaret. A little fresh air could be good." I watched her drive away the second she dropped me off, too eager to be rid of me for a couple hours. Perfect. I shuffled inside on my own. Familiar faces turned my way, half smiles and cautious nods. Everyone had heard something. Stroke, memory issues, some whispered hint that Margaret Miller wasn't all there anymore. Good. Let them believe that a little longer. Then I saw her, Lucille, sitting in the third pew from the front, same spot she'd claimed since 1991, the year her husband left, and she swore God was the only man worth depending on. She glanced up and saw me, and for a second, her lips parted like a window cracking open. I slipped in beside her, slow and quiet. "Margaret," she whispered, "it's so good to see you out. How are you feeling?" I leaned in close, not looking at her, my voice barely above breath. "I need a recorder." Lucille blinked. "Pardon?" "A voice recorder. Something small. One of those pocket things your grandson used for his interviews. You still have one?" She narrowed her eyes at me, heart catching up with mine. Lucille had always been quick. "They're trying to take it, Lucille," I said. "The house. They think I don't know." Lucille didn't say a word, just reached into her purse and handed me a peppermint, and slipped a small brass key into my palm along with it. "Go to my house after service. Hall closet. Shoebox labeled tax stuff underneath. It's yours." My throat tightened. I couldn't even thank her properly. Not in that moment. Not with the choir starting up, and the whole church humming the opening hymn. But I squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. After the benediction, I waited until the room cleared, walked slow, steady. Not too alert, not too fragile, just enough to look harmless. Then I walked 3 blocks down Elm to Lucille's house, let myself in with the key, found the shoebox, and there it was, a slim, black voice recorder with a single red button. Simple, quiet, sharp. I held it in my hand like it was holy. Because in a house where no one thought I could understand what was being done to me, this little plastic box was the only way I could speak without speaking. I tucked it inside the lining of my knitting bag, stitched a tiny pocket there weeks ago, just in case I ever needed to hide anything important. Lydia never looked there. She thought knitting was a waste of time. She'd never understand the kind of strength it took to spin quiet into strategy. Back home, I walked in just as Brian was speaking with someone on the phone. "Yeah, just waiting on her to sign. Doctor says she's still a little hazy. Shouldn't be a problem." He turned, surprised to see me standing in the doorway. "You okay, Mom?" I smiled, slow and sweet. I think the sermon did me good. And I sat in my chair, pulled out my yarn, and clicked the recorder on. Right there, under their noses. Because this wasn't just my home anymore. It was a crime scene in progress, and I was collecting evidence. It didn't take long. The moment I clicked that red button and let the yarn fall softly into my lap, Their masks slipped. Just a little. Just enough. Brian was in the next room on a video call. Lydia, thinking I was half asleep in my chair, walked right past me and into the kitchen. She didn't even bother lowering her voice. "She's got another appointment Wednesday," she said. "If we can get her to sign by Friday, the open house goes live next week." Open house. I slipped a stitch. My hand trembled. But not enough to stop knitting. Not enough to make it obvious. Brian mumbled something back. Inaudible. But I caught the sigh. The way he always sighed when he knew what Lydia wanted but didn't have the guts to say it himself. Then she said it. Clear. Clean. Captured. I don't care if she remembers her name or not. She doesn't need to. She just needs to hold the pen. I stopped knitting for half a second. Just long enough to let the recorder soak it in. I felt sick. Not because of what she said. I already knew who she was. But because of the way Brian didn't push back. My own son. A man I'd raised with warmth and forgiveness. The boy I used to walk to the bus stop every morning, rain or shine. Now all grown up and standing silent while his wife plotted to erase me. I kept recording. Over the next 2 days, I caught more than I expected. Lydia joking with the agent on the phone about dealing with the old bat. Brian asking if they could get more money if they included the backyard shed in the sale. I even got Lydia muttering, "She's lucky we're not putting her in a home. At least this way she still gets her bed for a few more weeks." I didn't flinch. I just kept knitting. Each row, a silent prayer. Each knot, a little record of patience. The bag never left my side. I even brought it to the doctor's office when Brian insisted on driving me to a routine checkup. In the car, I played dumb, asked him where we were going twice, forgot the year, pretended to think his name was Richard. He corrected me gently, smiled, believed every bit of it, and in the back seat, zipped inside the lining of my bag. The red light blinked quietly, recording it all. That night, I replayed a few seconds in my head. Lydia's voice, smug and cruel. "She doesn't need to know. We'll handle it." I tucked the bag under my pillow when I went to sleep. I don't know if they checked. I doubt they cared. They thought I was slipping. They thought they were ahead of me. But I was knitting a net while they were setting a trap. And I already knew how this pattern would end. Lucille called me the next morning, her voice low and steady. "You get anything?" she asked. "I got everything," I whispered. "She thinks I'm knitting scarves. I'm building a case." Lucille let out a quiet laugh. "Told you that recorder still had a little justice left in it." Justice. That word stayed with me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't looking to humiliate them. I just wanted my name back. My voice. My place in a house I built with my own hands, on a porch I painted, in a kitchen where I baked birthday cakes for a boy who now looked at me like an obstacle. That recorder was more than plastic and wires. It was the only thing in the house still listening to me, and I had a lot left to say. I stopped remembering things that didn't need forgetting. "Did I already eat breakfast?" I asked one morning, staring blankly at an empty plate I'd just rinsed. Lydia looked up from her phone, smiling like I was a child who'd tied her shoes wrong. "Yes, Margaret, you had oatmeal, don't you remember?" I blinked, looked down at the sponge in my hand. "That's right. Silly me." She patted my shoulder too hard. "It's okay. We all have our moments." Brian nodded from the couch without looking up. "Just part of aging. No big deal." I went to the sink and turned on the water. Let the faucet run until the room filled with its hum. Then I whispered, "They're buying it." That night, I opened the drawer where we used to keep the family calendar, back when birthdays were remembered, and Brian still believed in thank you cards. I pretended not to understand what day it was, pointed to a dentist appointment from last year, and asked if it was coming up soon. Brian rubbed his temples and muttered, "Maybe we should move things along." That was the third time he said it in a week. Always in the evening. Always low. Always when Lydia wasn't in earshot. As if whispering his own guilt could make it quieter. And then came the papers. Lydia brought them in like it was nothing. Just a clipboard and a polite smile. "Hi, Margaret," she said, all sugar and bleach. "I brought something that might help. It's just for the power of attorney stuff. You know, so we can keep things running smooth." She said it like she was doing me the favor. I took the clipboard with shaking hands. Not from fear, but to sell the scene. What does this mean? I asked, turning it slowly, letting my fingers fumble over the edges. She leaned in, pointing with her fingernail. This just lets Brian make decisions for you. Only in emergencies. Nothing major. You trust him, right? I looked at Brian. His eyes dropped to the floor. I turned back to her. Do I have to sign it now? Whenever you feel ready, she said quickly. But sooner's probably better. Just in case something else happens. She meant another stroke. I forced my smile to quiver. Maybe I could talk to my friend Lucille first? She used to help me with papers. Lydia's jaw clenched, just for a second. Then it disappeared behind another fake laugh. Of course. Whatever makes you feel safe. But I knew that look. She didn't like delays. Didn't like questions. And she especially didn't like me remembering anything, or anyone, outside this house. She left the clipboard on the side table and walked off. Later that night, I heard her talking to Brian in the kitchen. She's dragging her feet. We need that signature, Brian. We can't sell without it. She's senile, not stupid. My heart thudded. Not stupid. She finally said it out loud. The next day, a notary showed up. She was young, polite, clearly uncomfortable with how Lydia hovered behind me the whole time. This is just a basic power of attorney form, ma'am, she explained gently. It gives your son some legal ability to help with medical and financial things. I tilted my head. Can I sign with my left hand? My right's been acting up. The notary smiled, nodded. Absolutely. I took the pen, let it hover over the page, then I paused. What day is it again? I asked, blinking. Friday, the notary said, glancing uncertainly at Lydia. Oh, I thought it was Sunday. I shook my head, placed the pen down. I think I need a nap. Lydia's smile cracked. Margaret, I'm tired, I said flatly, and stared right at her. No smile, no sweetness, just a look to let her know I saw her. The notary packed up and left in a hurry. Lydia didn't speak for the rest of the day. Later that evening, the recorder in my knitting bag caught her muttering while slamming the silverware drawer shut. She's just a senile obstacle. I pressed play that night. Over and over. Her voice spitting those words. Senile obstacle. Good. Let them doubt me. Because the longer they underestimated me, the louder their arrogance got, and I was still recording. Still collecting. Still building the silence that would one day destroy their noise. I woke up the next morning to the sound of drawers opening. Lydia was in the hallway closet, rustling through paperwork like she owned the place. Her heels clicked back and forth on the wood floor as she muttered to herself, barely containing her irritation. She should have signed already, she hissed. How hard is it to scribble a name? I waited in my room, slippers on, blanket over my lap, the recorder already tucked under the Afghan I was finishing for Brian, a fake gift for a fake son. When I walked out 20 minutes later, I shuffled to the kitchen, pretending not to notice the crumpled papers on the counter. Lydia was pouring herself coffee with a grin so tight I thought her teeth might crack. Morning, Margaret, she said, too brightly. Morning, I whispered back. She eyed me over the rim of her mug. Feeling any clearer today? I tilted my head. I dreamed about the dog. The one we used to have. Remember that? The mutt with the crooked ear? She blinked. We never had a dog. I nodded, acting dazed. No, we did. Brown and loud. I turned and opened the fridge slowly, letting the moment hang. I didn't need to convince her I was losing it. I just needed her to think she was running out of time. That afternoon, Brian tried again. He sat across from me with the patience of a man about to ask his mother for money. Mom, he said gently, do you remember talking to the notary yesterday? I tapped my finger on the armrest. That was the nice girl with the glasses, right? He smiled, relieved. Yes. She brought over the papers we talked about. Did I sign them? He hesitated. No, but it's okay. We can do it today. It's just easier if I can help manage the bills and the doctor's stuff. That's all. I looked right at him. Are you sure it's not so Lydia can sell the house? His face paled. A blink. A breath. Then, like a reflex, he laughed. What? No, of course not. I smiled. Small. Controlled. My voice barely above a whisper. Because I keep hearing things. From the kitchen. From the porch. From her. Brian swallowed hard. You're confused, Mom. That's just the stroke. You're not remembering things right. Maybe, I said. And I reached for my knitting. He left not long after. And that night, Lydia exploded. She thought I was asleep. Had no idea the recorder was right there in the basket beside me. I'm done being polite, she snapped. She's dragging this out on purpose. If she thinks she can hold up the sale, she's wrong. The agent said the listing window is perfect right now. I'm not waiting another month just because her pen can't find the paper. Brian muttered something back, but Lydia was in full swing. Then we'll tell the doctor she's unfit. Get it signed that way. That's how people handle this. It's legal. It's fine. I'm not throwing away $600,000 because your mother can't remember what year it is. She slammed a cupboard. I lay in bed, eyes open in the dark, staring at the ceiling. 600,000. That's what my home meant to them. Not memories. Not birthdays. Not the porch swing Brian helped install the summer he turned 12. Just a number in a listing. I clicked the recorder off. I had enough. More than enough. But I needed one more person. Someone outside this house. Someone with a license, a backbone, and a memory of their own. The next morning, I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. Danielle Ellis, the lawyer I once helped when she was just starting out. She'd cried in my kitchen after her diagnosis, back when she had no one to turn to. I answered then. Now, it was her turn. When she picked up, her voice cracked slightly. Mrs. Miller, it's been so long. I cleared my throat. Danielle, I need your help. They're trying to sell my house while I'm still in it. Silence. Then, tell me everything. And for the first time in weeks, I stopped pretending. I told the truth. By the next morning, when they left, Danielle was in my living room, blazer sharp, hair tied back, eyes fierce in a way I hadn't seen since she was 29, and fighting to pass the bar while going through chemo. Back then, I fed her soup and prayers. Now she stood in my home, holding a leather briefcase full of answers. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. I closed the door behind her and said quietly, "They think I don't know what they're doing." She raised an eyebrow. "Do they also think I don't?" I smiled for the first time in days. Really smiled. We sat at the dining table, the same table Lydia had cleared of every family photo just last week, and I opened my knitting bag. "This has everything," I said, pulling out the recorder. Names, dates, her voice, his silence. Danielle nodded, pulled out her laptop, and plugged the device in. She listened with headphones, while I watched her eyes narrow, her jaw clench. She paused at Lydia's voice, saying, "She's just a senile obstacle." "That's enough," she said, snapping the headphones off. "I'm filing a motion to freeze the sale immediately. Elder fraud, abuse of power, coercion. I'll use the recordings to get a protective order." I blinked, heart racing. "Will that stop them?" Danielle looked at me like I was the judge and jury herself. "It'll stop them in their tracks." I reached across the table and gripped her wrist. "Thank you. You helped me find my footing when I had nothing," she said softly. This is just me walking you back to yours." We got to work. Danielle had me locate all original documents for the house. Deed, utility bills, insurance statements, anything with my name on it. I knew where everything was, even if I pretended not to. Lydia had never cared enough to look under the sewing machine drawer. That's where I kept the envelope marked for emergencies. This qualified. We made copies of everything. Danielle even took photos of the kitchen and living room to prove I was still actively living here, not some forgotten relic in a nursing home. She whispered, "Courts like pictures. They make the lies look smaller." Before she left, she turned back to me in the foyer. "One more thing. You have to keep playing the part. Until the motion's granted, you can't let them know you've spoken to me. Can you do that? I nodded. I've kept quiet this long. That night, I sat at the dinner table with Brian and Lydia like nothing had changed. Brian asked how I was feeling. I smiled gently. What's your name again? He chuckled nervously. It's Brian, Mom. Oh, I said, blinking. That's right. You look like someone I used to know. Lydia laughed like it was charming. See? She's harmless. I excused myself early, told them I was tired, and when I closed my bedroom door, I turned off the lamp and sat in the dark, wide awake, listening to the hum of my house being stolen, one conversation at a time. But now I had a lawyer. Now I had proof. Now I had time on my side. The next morning, Lucille called. I just saw the listing go live, she whispered. Online, it's got pictures. Of your kitchen, your garden. My chest went tight. They didn't even tell me. They think you're gone already, Margaret. I looked at the recorder. The stack of documents Danielle left on the table. The photo of Brian as a baby still tucked inside my recipe box. No, I said. They think I'm dead. But I'm still breathing. Lucille paused. Then keep breathing, honey. We're almost there. That night, I backed up the recordings onto a flash drive and labeled it with a strip of masking tape, the truth, in their own voices. I hid it inside the cookie tin Lydia never touched. She said I baked too old-fashioned. Perfect. Let her think everything was hers already. Let her decorate the house for sale. Let her price the kitchen. Because the higher they climbed, the farther they were going to fall. And I would be the one pulling the curtain. The house was up for sale. Photos of my garden, my curtains, even my dented mailbox were online now, dressed up with words like charming, sun-drenched, and motivated seller. Motivated. I almost laughed when I read it. I sat at the kitchen table with the laptop Danielle had dropped off. She said it was safer than using mine. Lydia wouldn't think twice about me having one. She assumed I couldn't work a password, let alone open an email. Joke's on her. I opened my own retirement account in 1982 on a typewriter. I knew more about numbers and quiet war than she ever would. Danielle had sent a message. Motion to freeze filed. Hearing set for Thursday. Sit tight. Keep acting. Don't sign anything. Thursday. I nodded. So they know. She says they'll probably show. But don't be surprised if they act like it's all a joke. Lydia told someone at choir practice that it's just a little misunderstanding. I smiled, tight. Let her think it's theater. I looked at the recorder. They had center stage long enough. Now it's my turn. I just had to make it to Thursday, without blinking too fast, without speaking too clearly, without letting the truth slip from behind my eyes. At breakfast, Lydia was chipper. Brian, more withdrawn. I could see it. The weight settling on him. He always broke down first. I have good news, Lydia said, buttering toast that I had baked, using a knife I sharpened, in a kitchen I designed. An agent is bringing a couple by this weekend, she added. They're flying in from Florida. I blinked slowly. Florida? Is that near Tennessee? She laughed. Close enough. Brian winced. Will they be living here? I asked, pushing my eggs around the plate. Hopefully, she said too brightly. But that all depends on the inspection, which is why it'd be best if we could, start preparing for change. I gave her the most fragile smile I could muster. Is there something wrong with the house? I asked, wide-eyed. No, sweetheart, she replied. Nothing wrong. It's just time to transition. Like I was being moved out of hospice. I nodded and stared at the toast. Do you think I'll like Florida? I asked quietly. Brian got up and left the room. Lydia didn't even notice. Later that afternoon, the appraiser came by. A young man with too much gel in his hair and not enough warmth behind his handshake. Lydia guided him through every room like it was hers. This is the guest room, she said, pointing to my sewing room. Could be a perfect nursery. My throat tightened. He asked to see the basement. Lydia hesitated. She didn't know the light was out down there. I offered to show him. I've lived here a long time, I said, shuffling ahead of them. Sometimes the steps are tricky. I let my hand graze the wall, let my voice shake. But when we reached the bottom, I leaned close to the appraiser. Be careful what you write, I whispered. There's a court date coming, and this house? It's not hers to sell. He blinked. I smiled softly. Have a good day now, I added, loud enough for Lydia to hear from the top of the stairs. That night, I slipped the flash drive into a padded envelope and wrote Danielle's office address on the front. I mailed it first thing in the morning. Evidence, in case they got desperate. I wasn't just playing defense anymore, I was closing in. Brian barely looked at me that evening. Lydia was bubbling with energy, laughing too loudly, talking about paint samples and spa blue walls. Let her pick out curtains. Let her dream of tile colors. Let her keep painting her fantasy on a canvas that didn't belong to her. Because behind the scenes, the curtain was rising. And when the lights came up Thursday morning, she wouldn't be the one center stage, I would. And I wouldn't be asking for my house back, I'd be taking it. By Tuesday, Lydia was glowing. She floated through the house like it was already hers, talking to herself about cabinet finishes and calling Brian babe again, like she only did when she thought she'd won something. I just nodded and smiled. Oh, and the agent said, "We're looking at a bidding war," she chirped, leaning against the kitchen island that I had once scrubbed down the night before Brian's high school graduation. Can you believe that? All this time we thought the place was a fixer-upper, but apparently buyers loved the vintage charm. She air-quoted it like she wasn't referring to my life. I didn't answer. Just stirred my tea and asked, "Is it Tuesday?" Lydia grinned. "Close, Wednesday." It was Tuesday. I wanted her to correct me. I wanted to see how far she'd go to keep the illusion alive, now that she believed it. "You should wear something nice tomorrow," she added, opening a box of sample swatches. "We're doing new photos for the site, something more staged. Less, elderly." Elderly. I bit down on my tongue so hard I tasted copper. I wasn't the one shrinking into a lie. She was, shrinking into delusion, painting herself into someone else's future. "Will I be in the pictures?" I asked, letting my voice wobble. Lydia tilted her head, confused. "No, sweetie, just the house. We want buyers to see potential, not," she paused, "history. History. As if I were wallpaper." I nodded. "I'll make sure I'm invisible then." That night, I sat alone in the garden with my tea, the recorder tucked next to my hip in the folds of my cardigan. Lucille had come by earlier to drop off cinnamon muffins and whispered, "Danielle said the motion's been processed. You've got a time slot, Thursday at 9. I nodded and didn't even cry. The recorder caught me whispering into the twilight. "They think I'm decorating a nursing home in my head, but I'm building a courtroom." Wednesday came. So did the photographer. Young, hip, with a camera that probably cost more than my first car. Lydia was practically spinning with joy. She fluffed pillows, lit candles, moved my framed photos off the shelves, and replaced them with books she'd never read. Brian stood by the door, stiff and silent. "You want to smile with me?" Lydia asked him, holding up a wine glass she never used unless company came. He didn't answer, just glanced at me. "You okay, Mom?" I blinked at him. "I think I'm cold." It was 74 degrees inside. He didn't push. He never did. The photographer took dozens of photos. I stayed upstairs, wrapped in my shawl, watching from the top landing like a ghost. No one looked up. No one wondered where I'd gone. Perfect. Because when they looked back at those pictures, they'd see a home with no past, no soul, no heartbeat. And that's exactly how it would look in court. A property emptied for profit, not preservation. That evening, I baked a pie. Apple. The same one I used to make every September when Brian started school. Lydia refused a slice. Too many carbs. But I watched Brian eat 2 pieces in silence. After dinner, Lydia scrolled through her phone and laughed. "The listing already has 12 saves. This is happening, babe." Brian nodded, then stood. He cleared the plates like he used to when he was 12 and trying to earn allowance. "Thanks, Mom," he muttered. I looked at him. Really looked. "You're welcome," I said. I remember pie always helped him sleep. Lydia looked confused. "Helped who?" I just smiled. Brian froze at the sink, his shoulders tight. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow they'd learn I wasn't history. I was testimony, evidence, owner, and they'd been living in a fantasy built on stolen time. The clock was done ticking. Now it was about to strike. The courthouse was colder than I remembered. Tile floor, pale walls, the scent of old paper and nerves. I sat outside courtroom 4B in a chair that felt too stiff for someone supposedly losing her mind. My cardigan sleeves were rolled unevenly. My shoes didn't match, on purpose. A brown loafer and a navy flat. I saw Lucille wince when she noticed, but I just smiled. "They think I'm a mess," I whispered. "Let's give them one." Danielle arrived 5 minutes later, briefcase in hand, lips set like stone. "You sure about this?" she asked quietly, crouching next to me. I nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." She patted my knee and stood as the bailiff opened the doors. Inside, the room was half full. Lydia and Brian were already seated across the aisle, pretending to be concerned. Lydia was in cream. She wore innocence like a costume, tailored, tight, and stiff around the edges. Brian looked like a ghost of himself. Danielle helped me to my feet, and we walked in slow. Everyone watched me. I kept my steps uneven, just a touch off, enough to make them believe the script. I'd been feeding them for weeks. "Case number 3487, the clerk called. Margaret Miller versus Brian and Lydia Holloway. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and sharp eyes, adjusted her glasses. Danielle opened. "Your Honor, this is a motion to freeze the sale of a home that was listed under false pretenses, while the legal owner, Ms. Miller, was deliberately misled and psychologically manipulated into appearing unfit to manage her own estate." She turned to look at me. "We have evidence." Lydia stood up before the judge even asked. "Your Honor, if I may, Margaret has been slipping for months. She's had memory lapses, confusion, even forgetting her son's name. We were trying to help. This is just a misunderstanding." The judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn, Mrs. Holloway." Danielle pulled a flash drive from her briefcase and handed it to the bailiff. "If it pleases the court, I'd like to play 3 short recordings," she said. The judge nodded. The first recording played. Lydia's voice, sharp as vinegar. "She doesn't need to know. We'll handle it." A few gasps. Lydia blinked, but said nothing. The second one. "She's just a senile obstacle." The judge glanced at Lydia now. Brian shifted in his seat. Then the third. "We can't wait for her to die forever." Silence. You could hear the air conditioning buzz. Danielle turned to me. "Ms. Miller, are you lucid enough to testify?" I stood slowly, let my shoulders straighten. Then, for the first time in weeks, I let my real voice out. "Perfectly lucid, Your Honor." Gasps again. This time from Lydia. Brian looked like he'd been slapped. I took a step forward, heels echoing loud. They thought I was too quiet to fight back. They thought confusion meant consent. But I knew exactly what they were doing. I knew every word. I recorded it all because I wasn't sure anyone would believe a, quote, senile old woman over a polished couple with a real estate agent and a smile. I reached into my handbag and unfolded the note card. "I'm not confused, I was silent." The judge nodded slowly. "Mrs. Miller," she said carefully, "do you wish to revoke all consent given or implied for this property transaction?" "Yes," I said. "And I'd like to request a full investigation into the conduct of both individuals sitting at that table." Lydia opened her mouth, but no sound came. Brian finally looked up at me, like really looked, and I saw it in his eyes. Shame. But it was too late for shame. Danielle added one more thing. "We're requesting an immediate injunction and protective order under elder fraud and undue influence." The judge nodded again. "Granted." Gavel down. And just like that, the fantasy they built on my back cracked wide open. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. But inside, I felt it. The first breath of real freedom. And it tasted nothing like lavender. It tasted like justice. The courtroom didn't clap. This wasn't a movie. But the silence after the gavel dropped, thick and stunned, was louder than applause. I stood there, still holding my note card, fingers steady. My voice didn't shake. My legs didn't wobble. I didn't look back at them. Let them look at me. Let them see the woman they thought they could erase. The woman who watched, waited, and recorded every betrayal while they mistook silence for surrender. Lydia tried to speak as the bailiff approached her. "Wait, what is this? Are we being arrested?" The judge didn't even glance up. "You're being detained for questioning in connection to an ongoing fraud investigation. Deputies will escort you. You may contact legal counsel after your initial interview." I turned then. Just enough to see it. Her hand shot toward Brian, but he stepped back. Just a little. Just enough. "Brian," she hissed. "Say something." He didn't. She looked like she wanted to scream. I watched her get led out the side door. No heels now, no power walk, no control. The real estate queen reduced to a woman gripping a knockoff purse and a fading sense of entitlement. Then it was Brian's turn. They didn't cuff him, yet, but they didn't let him walk out on his own either. He looked at me one last time, and this time, his face wasn't smug. It was hollow, like he'd finally realized that love without respect isn't love at all, just convenience, just cowardice. I said nothing to him, not out of spite, because I finally understood. I wasn't his mother anymore, not in the way he'd made me beg to be. Danielle gathered the files and handed me a folder. "This is just the start," she whispered. "We'll file for restitution next." I nodded. The legal part was still unfolding. But the real part, the part where I stood up for myself and refused to be erased, that was already done. Lucille was waiting just outside the courtroom doors. When I walked through them, she smiled, her eyes glassy. "Told you they didn't know who they were dealing with," she said. I let out a slow breath. "They didn't even try to hide it, Lucille. They thought I was already gone." She slipped her arm through mine. "And now they're the ones disappearing." We walked out of that courthouse into gray daylight, the kind that feels heavy but honest. No parades, no music, just the rhythm of my steps, firm and real, echoing on the sidewalk as we headed toward her car. At home, I let myself in slowly. Same house, same furniture, but it didn't feel hollow anymore. It felt like mine again. Every wall had stood with me. Every room had heard their voices, but now they'd heard mine too. I brewed tea in the quiet and took out the wind chime from the garden shed, hung it back up by the porch window, where Lydia had taken it down, said it was dated. I watched it sway once, then ring. Soft, clear, defiant. Danielle called 2 hours later. Said the judge's order had gone through county records. Sale frozen. Property secure. Power of attorney request formally denied. "They're officially locked out of everything," she said. I nodded. "Then I think I'm ready to change the locks." That night, I sat with Lucille on the porch. She handed me a small box. "What's this?" I asked. "Replacement keys," she said with a wink. And a surprise. Inside, nestled in felt, was a new brass nameplate. It read, "Margaret Miller, owner, survivor, witness." I laughed, really laughed. "It's a bit much." "No," Lucille said. "It's just enough." The next morning, I nailed it right on the front gate. So every delivery man, neighbor, and hopeful thief would know. I'm still here. I'm still standing. And my voice? It doesn't fade. I should have known Lydia wouldn't go down quiet. A week after the court ruling, just when I thought the ground beneath me had settled, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and didn't breathe. There she was, hair straighter, makeup thicker, smile like a hook. Lydia. She held a brown paper bag in one hand and a tote in the other, as if she were showing up for coffee, not crawling back from disgrace. I didn't open the door. She rang the bell again, 3 short taps, then called out, "Margaret, I brought banana bread. Just wanted to talk." Talk. Now she wanted to talk. I stayed behind the curtain, silent, watching her shift from foot to foot. Her voice came next, fake soft, the same tone she used with the appraiser. "I just wanted to clear the air. There's been so much confusion. And Brian, well, he's not doing well. I think we all said things we didn't mean. She always did that, spread the blame like peanut butter, trying to make the knife less sharp. I stepped back from the window, slowly, and went to the kitchen, poured tea like I hadn't heard a thing. She knocked again. Please, Margaret, you know me. I've always cared about you. You were just going through so much. I didn't know how to help. She didn't say sorry. She said she didn't know how to help. As if selling my home out from under me was a kindness. I let her stand out there for 8 minutes. I counted. Eventually, the wind picked up and she started to shiver. I heard her mutter something, probably an insult, but she never raised her voice. She knew better now. She finally left. When I opened the door after she was gone, I saw the banana bread sitting there on the welcome mat like a bribe wrapped in nostalgia. I didn't touch it. I took the plastic bag, dropped it right in the trash. Then I opened the tote she left behind. Inside were old pictures, photos she must have yanked off the fridge when she was staging the house. Brian's baby photo, my wedding portrait, a Christmas card from 1998. None of them had ever meant anything to her. But now they were breadcrumbs back to Mercy. I closed the tote and set it in the garage. Later that evening, Lucille came over. She showed up at your door? She asked, jaw tight. Like nothing happened, I said, sipping my tea. Lucille glanced toward the trash bin. You tossed the bread? Didn't even open it. Lucille smiled slowly. Proud of you. I didn't feel proud. I felt clean. There's a difference. Because pride still wants to be seen. Clean just wants peace. That night, I wrote a letter. Not to Brian, not to Lydia. To myself. Margaret. She'll come again. Maybe him too. They'll look different. Softer. Desperate. But remember the voice in the recording. Remember the silence when you cried. Remember who opened the door for you. You. You don't owe them redemption. I folded the letter and placed it in the same drawer where I once hid the voice recorder. A reminder. The next day, Lucille helped me put up a new sign at the end of the driveway. Hand-painted. Weatherproofed. Private property. Trespassers will be recorded. We laughed as we hammered it into the ground. You really want that last part on there? Lucille asked. Yes, I said, because it's true. That recorder might be off now. But I'm not. I'm listening. And I will never let anyone rewrite my story again. Not with charm, not with banana bread, and not with crocodile apologies. Not ever.